starting off the news. Well, Terrifier 3 is already in theaters. And yes, if you've seen the film already, it's probably going to be a very bloody, gory, shocking type of horror film, everyone. How do I already know this? Case in point. Terrifier 3 recently ran into trouble in France, as this film literally became the first horror movie in France that has banned minors from seeing it. And France never banned minors from seeing any film. The only time they've done that was back in 2006 when Saw 3 came out. That pretty much tells you the story of why this film got banned for minors over in France. It's probably even gorier than Saw 3, and I haven't seen this film yet. But I've been hearing things of people walking out of the film in the first 10 minutes. I've been hearing things that people are throwing up at this film screenings. And this is before its theatrical release, everyone. So, the Classification Commission over in France drew a line, and quite literally, banning the minors from seeing Terrifier 3. First of all, if I had kids, I would not take them to see Terrifier 3, or any of the Terrifier films for that matter. Don't get me wrong, I love these films, but taking a minor is like going a little too far here. Literally, because if I was going to introduce my kid to horror, if I had a kid, I would start off with maybe like the Addams Family, stuff like that, Nightmare Before Christmas, then start going up with Beetlejuice, the original Halloween, those types of films. If I was to get my kid into horror films, those are the types of films I would have him watch. Then maybe when he's like a teenager, then maybe consider showing the Terrifier films and other crazy films from the 80s. So, I can see France's point of view, because Hollywood studios would not finance this film the way Damien Leone wrote the script. And they really wanted to finance this film. But I have to give credit to Damien Leone for keeping his vision intact and not letting or giving in to the major studios so it's easy to get funding. You've already set the bar so high with the first two films that you can't go and tone down the violence. At this point, you have to continue to top it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts here. You already started a trend with the first Terrifier and the hacksaw scene. Now you have to top that with the scalping scene in the second one. Then in the third one, I don't know what they're gonna do. Seriously. There seems like a couple of scenes in the film Terrifier 3 where obviously the major studios were squeamish, so maybe those are the scenes that like top the scalping scene in 2. One of those scenes has to be, obviously. So it's gonna be very interesting when I see Terrifier 3, as I will see this on the big screen this time around. In more Terrifier 3 news. Last episode, I talked about Silver Scream Con 3, which I had an excellent time at. Well, during the Ice Nine Kills panel for that, the band announced that they are doing the official theme song for Terrifier 3 called A Work of Art. Now, I'm kind of very excited to hear this new Ice Nine Kills song, because I'm a big Ice Nine Kills fan. And it was probably a matter of time before they did a Terrifier song. So, it kind of works out very well here. Seriously. I like the fact that it's the official theme song of Terrifier 3. And I'm waiting to see what Spencer and the boys have in store for that single. As they've done a good job with their last two albums, as I thought they were both excellent, The Silver Scream and Welcome to Horrorwood. So I just can't wait for this song to be released, probably on the release date as Terrifier 3, I hope, on streaming music sites. So I think that's also the release date for that. So it might even be out on streaming sites right now to listen to. So that's all the Terrifier 3 news I have. I can't wait to review this film. It'll probably be a YouTube channel review over at youtube.com @FilmArcadeMedia, so keep an eye out for that review on that site. I will also post my thoughts on that review up on the social media pages as well for the show, so keep an eye out for that over on Facebook. So don't forget to like Facebook at Anthony T's Horror and Wrestling, as I'll also post the link once the Terrifier 3 review comes up. Moving on. Now, since we're on Terrifier 3, why talk about another film from the producers of Terrifier 3? That's right, Stream. Remember, say a month ago on the Film Arcade Media YouTube channel, I did a review for Stream. This was like a spur of the moment review that I decided to do because I literally wanted to do this review, first of all, because I had a really good time watching this film, and it had a limited 1 week release in theaters. And I wanted to get the word out on this film really quickly before it got out of theaters quickly. Because it was one of those releases where it's playing for a week, that's it, because it's the distributor and it has limited showings at night. So news finally has broken that this film will be heading to streaming. Get it? Streaming? The team behind the Terrifier films will be releasing Stream on October 15th. It'll be on all the major platforms: Fandango at home, iTunes, Apple TV, to name a few. This is a film directed by Michael Levy. It is a very good horror film. I had a blast watching this film. This has a lot of horror icons in this film, including Jeffrey Combs, Tony Todd, Danielle Harris, Tim Reed, Dee Wallace, Mark Holton, Felissa Rose, Daniel Roebuck, Dave Sheridan, Terry Alexander, Damian Melfi, Bill Moseley, David Howard Thornton, and the legend Tim Curry. I was lucky enough to see this film back when it was in theaters for that quick moment, and I really enjoyed the hell out of it. This film is really good. It has a lot of really good kill scenes in this film. It has a very good story. Plus the fact that this film is very intense. It is like Terrifier level intense. This isn't like your normal studio horror film. It really delivers on the gore. It's creative in its kills. Everything. I'm very happy that this is finally hitting streaming, as it will hit streaming services October 15th. It's definitely a film people really should go out of their way and check out this Halloween season. It is a very good horror film, and one of the best I've seen this year. And finally, for this first batch of news, Edgar Wright's latest upcoming film, The Running Man, has a release date. Yes, we're talking sci-fi here, but it's dystopian future, so it counts on this podcast. And this is a film I'm actually looking forward to seeing. I loved the original film a lot, but with Edgar Wright directing, it's gonna give me more of an incentive to see this film, because he's always been good in his films, as I'm a big fan of his films, obviously. But Paramount recently announced a release date for The Running Man. It'll be coming out next November 21st, 2025. The film is set to star Glenn Powell from Top Gun Maverick and Twisters, both blockbuster hits. And The Hollywood Reporter also reported that actress Katy O'Brien from films such as Love Lies Bleeding and Disney Plus's The Mandalorian will co-star in the film. We don't know who's playing the game show host in this film. I'm kind of interested to see who's going to be the game show host in this film, as Richard Dawson in that film was just really good. So I'm really hoping somebody on that level can fill his shoes very well, as this is one of those remakes I'm really interested in seeing, given the talent involved in this project. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm glad it's getting remade, because it probably could use a remake, because the film's kind of outdated, literally, the original. And I always thought that if there were films that definitely needed to be remade, that would be one of them. Even though I liked it, and I still hold it to my heart as one of my favorite Stephen King adaptations, as he uses the pseudonym Richard Bachman for this story. I'm kind of interested to see, with the advancement of technology and everything, how this movie would look today. So I'm really excited that this Running Man remake is coming. And it's coming next year. So it's one of those films that I'm really am going to put on my list, probably as one of my most anticipated films of 2025. Because you do have Edgar Wright, and you have Glenn Powell starring in it, who's been in two major blockbuster films, Top Gun Maverick and Twisters. So that should be an anticipated film with two big names attached to it. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this film does at the box office. And with that, that's part one of the news. When I get back, I will talk about Chucky news, including its cancellation on Sci-Fi and why it does not make me happy. I got that and a new documentary coming very soon. More like within a month. So stay tuned, as I'm just getting started.
Welcome to Dark Discussions, your place for the discussion of horror film, fiction, and all that's fantastic. A weekly podcast where the discussion is about the most recent horror and genre films. Intelligent talk on a genre that deserves intelligence. A conversation between co-hosts discussing not only the films, but also the connotation that the directors and screenwriters are trying to articulate. When you want more than a review, listen to Dark Discussions.
And speaking of perception, there's just one more scene I want to talk about, which is after Caleb discovers that Kyoto's a robot. Kyoto kind of peels off her skin, showing him what's underneath.
Now, wait a minute. I know where you're going with this, but tell me you weren't already thinking this 15 minutes earlier in the film. Exactly what he's thinking at that moment.
Which is he's a robot too.
Oh, I considered the possibility.
Right, and that's what I like, is the fact that the writers were smart enough to know that this is what the audience would be thinking.
We've all seen Blade Runner.
Right, exactly.
www.darkdiscussions.com, wherever podcasts are found.
Welcome back. Now I have a lot of Chucky news here. Seriously, I have at least two pieces of news. One's good, one's really bad. I really don't know where to start. Should I get the bad news out of the way first? Because I really want to rant about this and how I really think it did not deserve its fate. Or should I talk about a new Chucky-related project, which is heading to streaming very soon. More like in a couple of weeks soon. Should I start with the good news, the exciting news, or should I just get the bad news out of the way? You know what? I'll just get the bad news out of the way because I really want to talk about this. I've been waiting since literally last episode to talk about this, but I will talk about this now. Sci-Fi and USA canceled Chucky. That's right. The show, after 3 seasons on Sci-Fi and the USA Network, got the axe, as we will not be getting a 4th season of Chucky. Now, I'm very, very disappointed with these networks. Seriously disappointed with NBC Universal here. Because literally, Chucky was one of my go-to shows for horror, as I've never been excited for a TV show in quite a while. The last time I literally was excited for an over-the-air TV show maybe was Twin Peaks: The Return. I like the fact that everything's week to week, not this binge model where everything is at once. Sure, I'll watch it everything at once, but still, you don't have breathing room when you have a binge model in which everything is put out there all in one date. Look at what Disney Plus is doing with Agatha All Along. I like the way they're doing it. They give you the first 2 episodes, then they go week to week until they get to the last 2 episodes, which I think are both on the same day, which is fine. I have no problem. If you want to do it in a 2-part season finale, that's fine. Because I understand you have to get this show wrapped up by the end of October. So I like the way Disney does it with Agatha All Along. And I like the way Disney does it with their programming, too. I don't like the binge model where everything's on the streaming site at once. I don't like to binge whole seasons at once. I like the week to week. It keeps the show very interesting. It keeps me invested in what's going on. It makes me excited for the next episode. With binge watching, you're not excited. You're just blowing through all the episodes. Anyway, I was very disappointed that Chucky got canceled because, well, they left season 3 with a cliffhanger. And I really hate shows that end with a cliffhanger, then get canceled on television. I really hope this show gets revived in some fashion. Even if I dare say it, even if it gets picked up by a streaming network like Amazon Prime or Netflix. Sure, I would not like the fact that I would have to binge watch the season, but I will still binge watch the season because I'm a fan of the Chucky series. And if I'm a fan of something, I will binge watch it. Because that show needs a 4th season. I'm sorry. Literally, after the way that show ended with season 3, it needs a 4th season. Or at least a movie to wrap up the story. Because that's such a cliffhanger where I just can't, in my right mind, think about that's it for the series. We're just going to go off and do more Chucky movies after this. They need to wrap the story up one way or the other. Because Don Mancini has now painted himself into a corner by having season 3 end in such a cliffhanger the way it did. And it was a very bizarre way it ended, truthfully. So they need to wrap this up one way or the other. Either do another Chucky movie to wrap up the story, or do a season 4 to wrap up the story. Not just leave it like that. That's just a cop-out if it just ends like that. Seriously. Please. I just don't want this Chucky series to end the way it did. So bizarrely. Don't get me wrong, I love the Chucky series, but that was one of the most bizarre endings to a series if that was the final episode and Don Mancini decides to go in a different direction with the next Chucky film. So if they do a next Chucky film, this has to be wrapped up immediately, or else I don't know where they can go with this series. There's only one way out, because literally he really painted himself into a corner with that cancellation now and that ending to season 3. Now on to the good news, everyone. Well, there will be a new Chucky documentary coming out entitled Doc of Chucky. That's right, we're getting a Chucky documentary, and it's going to be hitting Shudder very soon. More like November 1st soon. This just popped up like the beginning of the month. So this kind of came out of nowhere. The fact that we are getting a documentary on the complete Chucky series. First of all, I'm surprised that they did a documentary because there's been no mention of a documentary coming out. Because usually when they do this documentary of a popular horror franchise, you would get some news about it happening. Not this time with Doc of Chucky, as this was surprisingly sprung up at the beginning of the month on BloodyDisgusting.com. Now, the person who's going to be behind the documentary is Tommy Hudson. He's the producer behind the comprehensive horror documentaries Never Sleep Again, The Elm Street Legacy, and Crystal Lake Memories, The Complete History of Friday the 13th. Now, those are two great documentaries here. So, this documentary is probably going to be must-see, as those two have been marathon-long documentaries on the franchise. It'd be interesting to see if this becomes a 3-hour-plus documentary as well as those two documentaries. But I can say those two documentaries are really great and cover the entire franchises of both A Nightmare on Elm Street and the Friday the 13th series. I was surprised that this came out quickly, but we're getting it, and there's a lot of talent involved in this. Interviews include Don Mancini, Brad Dourif, Jennifer Tilly, Catherine Hicks, Chris Sarandon, John Walters, Fiona Dorff, Perry Reeves, Garrett Graham, David Kushner, and dozens more. Not sure if we have Alex Vincent in the cast. I would not be surprised if he's in there as well, but I'm kind of surprised he's not mentioned in the press release or the news story here. Now, this is going to be the ultimate account of the whole Chucky Child's Play franchise. We'll have clips, photographs, archival document, and behind-the-scenes footage, and more. Not sure if it will include the TV series as well, as that's not explained in this. But according to this, it's going to be a love letter to the film's franchise. And it's going to be interesting to see this documentary, because I wonder how they're going to do this. Is this going to be like those two documentaries? It's going to be a very good documentary for sure, as Hudson knows how to do documentaries on horror franchises. This is not some average documentarian doing a franchise documentary. It's a guy that's handled two of the major franchises and gave it excellent documentaries to the point that it can be considered definitive documentaries. So I'm very excited for this documentary that's going to hit Shudder November 1st. As Shudder keeps putting out some good stuff, I have to admit. They've done a good job this year with some of their films that they've put out. And with that, that's the news. Every day there's a family struggling with hospital bills to care for their sick child who is fighting an illness. There's a woman who is fighting breast cancer and is having trouble making ends meet while paying for their treatment. And there are burn victims that are going through treatments to heal their deep wounds. There is a charity in the horror community that helps these people. Scares That Care is an organization that helps families deal with the bills for their child. They help women get the treatment they need to fight breast cancer, and they help people who are dealing with severe burns get the help they need to heal. Scares That Care is a 100% volunteer organization and 501c3 nonprofit charity that is dedicated to helping these people in fighting real monsters. To find out more information or to donate to Scares That Care, you can go to www.scaresthatcare.org. Every donation helps Scares That Care fight real monsters. Welcome back. Now, last episode I was supposed to get to my CT Horror Fest review, but a certain news item which I've already talked about enough on this podcast, because I could go on for another 5-10 minutes on it, took up that spot, because it needed to take up that spot, because it was something that needed attention immediately. So I had to push my CT Horror Fest review to this episode, as I'm playing catch up this episode. But anyway, I managed to go to Hartford, Connecticut the weekend after Silver Scream Con 3 for CT Horror Fest. Now, this is a convention that took place September 22nd and 23rd at the Connecticut Convention Center. This was a con going into where most of its headliners canceled. Skeet Ulrich was supposed to be there. He canceled. You had Amy Donald from Megan canceled due to filming for Megan 2. You had Tony Todd canceled due to bad health. You had Virginia Madsen canceled due to film commitments. So this convention was without headliners for the most part, because its headliners were Peter Weller, Jason Patric, and Alex Winter. Those are pretty much your three main headliners. You also had the stars of the Blair Witch Project. You had Kathy Najimy from Hocus Pocus. But it was really lacking that big headliner. And I really thought that this convention kind of suffered from it and more. Still, I went to this convention because I'm already committed. Plus the fact that I really wanted to meet the cast from the Blair Witch Project. Plus the fact that I wanted to meet Ashley Lawrence from Hellraiser. You also had Dina Meyer from the Saw franchise as well. So there was enough people for me to warrant going there. So I left Rhode Island Friday, took the train down to Hartford, Connecticut. It was a rough ride, I have to admit, going on two different trains, because I'm not used to doing two different trains. I'm used to doing maybe like one train, that's it. But anyway, I still had a good time. Seriously. Now, Friday when I get there, I easily get lost in Hartford, Connecticut. Don't ask me why. Because I just did, literally. Because I was shopping for stuff for my room and it just got lost. A lot of detours and everything in Hartford, Connecticut maybe caused the reason why I got lost. I should have followed Google Maps better than I did. Then Saturday came, day of convention. A lot of people showed up at the beginning of this day, which is good. I like to see that. Then it just died down as the day went. By like 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon, it really felt like there weren't many people in the building. Again, it's just maybe because the fact that so many headliners canceled. it's not the fault of the convention. I think they did a great job with the way they ran this convention. It's just they got unlucky with all these cancellations, which happens sometimes with cons. You may get unlucky. But anyway, here's my experience at the convention. This started off Saturday. I was in line. Doors open at 10 o'clock in the morning. Walked around a little bit. Then went right to Dina Meyer, since she barely had a line early at 10 o'clock, so I figured I'd get her out of the way. Very nice person. Then I would go to Peter Crosby from My Bloody Valentine. Another nice person. Had a nice fun time with that little pickaxe prop. Then I met Michelle Santiago, who was one of the producers of Stream and Terrifier 2. Also a very nice person. We talked a little bit about Stream. Then met Heather Donahue, who was also another nice person. As I have no complaints with the celebrities here at this convention, as they were all very nice people. Then met Kevin Van Henterick from Basket Case and Brain Damage. Both films directed by Frank Henenlotter. Also a very nice person. We chatted a little bit about Frank Henenlotter, as I'm a fan of his films. A Basket Case, Frankenhooker, Bad Biology. Super nice guy. Then I met Alex Ambuster from Thanksgiving. He was the guy who wore the John Carver suit in the film. He was very personable, very cool guy to meet. Then it was off to see Joshua Leonard of the Blair Witch Project. Also a very nice guy. Talked a little bit about the film. Then after meeting him, I got to meet Ken Kirzinger from Freddy vs. Jason. Another very nice guy. I also picked out a picture that I really liked with him and Robert Englund. Basically, during takes where Robert was holding a machete and Ken was wearing one of Robert's gloves. I saw that picture and I knew I needed it. And we talked about it, obviously, because I thought it was a really cool picture with Robert holding Jason's machete and Ken wearing one of Robert's gloves. I thought that was a cool looking picture and I knew I had to get that one. Of course, between all the celebrity interactions, I went through the vendors' tables, walking around. Of course, I spent about almost $200 at the VS table. Of course, I'm going to if VS is there, as I usually buy a lot of stuff at that table, obviously. Always seems like a table that I can never resist at a convention. Just can't. Sorry. Then I had 4 photo ops at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. That means every hour from 3 o'clock on to 6 o'clock, I had a photo op at the top of the hour. Which is very weird, considering the fact that I've never had that ever for a photo op. Sure, at Silver Scream Con I had photo ops back to back, but not a photo op every hour on the hour. So 3 o'clock was the Hellraiser photo op with Doug Bradley and Ashley Lawrence. That was a cool photo op. Then 4 o'clock was the Blair Witch photo op. And in between the 3 o'clock, I have to say either the 3 o'clock or the 4 o'clock photo ops, I decided to meet Javi Steffens from The Omen. Very nice guy. Talked a little bit about his classic film, The Omen, in which he played Damien, the little kid in that film. Very nice guy. Then, I believe it was 5 o'clock, it was the Alex Ambuster John Carver costume op, which was very good. I like that. That was a fun one. Then I ran upstairs, caught some of the Blair Witch Project panel. Had to run back. Probably had to leave like 5-10 minutes early just to get to the Ken Kirzinger costume op because he was doing a Jason costume op. So I had to do that, obviously. That came out really good. As that, I think, rivaled the Lauren Rivera and the Lee Waddell photo ops as my favorite photo ops out of the 2 weekends in terms of what photo ops I loved the most. As that really came out very good. Then I went upstairs to catch the Lost Boys panel and then decided to pretty much, call it a day. Thought about buying something else, but decided not to. Then we're moving on to Sunday morning. On Sunday, of course, I get in. Nice, decent-sized crowd for a Sunday morning. But again, it died down really quickly, maybe 2-3 hours after I got in. As I was able to move around this convention very well. As it didn't feel crowded or packed like the Naugatuck conventions where CT Horror Fest used to run. As there at the Connecticut Convention Center, it was a lot easy to walk around. Plus, the convention staffers were nice. It was nice having them around as they knew what they were doing. I even lost my wallet during that day, which was not good. But thankfully, I got it back, as I really don't want to lose my wallet. That would not be good. As sometimes you just misplace your wallet. Never misplace your wallet. And I'm usually good with my wallet during these conventions. But anyway, okay, some of the highlights from that day. As I didn't do much. I first saw Ashley Lawrence about 10 o'clock. That's probably one of the first things or a little afterwards. That was one of the first things I did during the day. Was meet her. She was a very nice person. Then I walked around for a bit. Didn't want to go too crazy on celebs because I pretty much got almost everyone. And I wasn't going to get Alex Winter or Jason Patrick because they were charging like almost $100 for a combo, each of them. I said, forget it. No. I don't think so. If it was 80, maybe, but not 100. Considering that everybody else was charging 60 or 80 or 70, no. 80 was, I think, my limit at this convention per celeb. As I really didn't want to go too over because, well, I got Rhode Island Comic Con coming up, obviously. Plus, I didn't want to go overboard because I was also buying food, too. Because when you got in these getaways, you also got to figure in food, soda, and all that other stuff. So you can't go too crazy on your convention spending. But I did get to meet Doug Bradley again, as I brought about 3 CDs of his audiobook series, which I'm going to listen to when I get the chance. Or when I get a chance to download it into my cloud, I will listen to it because, well, I download everything into my cloud nowadays. Put on YouTube Music, and there you go. I listen to it. But I will be listening to that. Then my final celeb that I met at this convention was Adrienne Barbaro. I could have met her a couple other times, but never had the chance. Or just didn't have the money. But this time I had it, so it was nice meeting her. Very nice person. We chatted a little bit about Creepshow, about how it was like to work with George Romero. It was fun. It was a very nice person. And it pretty much wrapped up my convention as literally the rest of the time was like walking around the convention floor, relaxing. Like I said, had that episode with my wallet. And also waiting for the Hellraiser panel that took place like around 3 o'clock. Which, if there was really one drawback to this con was there weren't enough panels. I wished there was at least 1 or 2 more panels. You could have done a panel with Alex, Ken, and Tyler. Have like a slasher panel. As you had the guy who played John Carver there. You had the guy who played Harry Warden there. You had the guy who played a Jason there. You had a guy who played a Michael Myers there. You could have had a slasher panel with 4 of those guys. It would have been an interesting panel. Because it would have been nice. It would have replaced the Skeet Ulrich panel that got canceled. But instead we got like only 2 panels on Sunday. When they could have just added a 3rd panel. Seriously. you had all these guys who played iconic slashers at the convention. You could have had a panel there with them, but they didn't. That was my only drawback to this con. They should have had at least another panel or two. It would have been nice. But overall, I had a very good time. Now, CT Horror Fest is doing 2 cons next year. I don't know about that strategy. After the way this convention went with attendance-wise, maybe because it was in a bigger building, the attendance was down. Plus, they had the debacle the year before at the XL Center, which may have kept attendance down. But that's kind of a ballsy move to do 2 cons next year. One in May, on May 3rd and 4th, and one in September, on September 20th and 21st. So, kind of an interesting move on CT Horror Fest's part. Maybe it works out for them, but I don't know about running 2 cons in the same year after this year felt kind of flat attendance-wise after like the beginning of the show. Because it just died down each day quickly. And it was nothing like Silver Scream Con, where it was just packed all weekend. But I really hope that CT Horror Fest continues, as this is a very good convention. And I had a fun time there, so I hope they continue to succeed. As this was a very good convention, and I think they have a very good venue at the Connecticut Convention Center. With that, that's my thoughts on CT Horror Fest 2024. If you want to find out the latest news for Anthony T's Horror and Wrestling Show, you can follow the podcast on the Slasher app, Facebook, and Instagram at Anthony T's Horror and Wrestling. You can also listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, DarkDiscussions.com, and the Film IK Media YouTube channel at youtube.com at Film IK Media. Welcome back. Now, I told you in the opening that I was going to review a film that I've been waiting for 2 years to see. That's right, 2 years to see. Actually, 2 years and almost 1 month. It's been a film that's been a topic on the podcast, as it kept changing release dates, like it was going out of style. It was like every couple of months, it kept changing release dates, starting in 2022 when the film was originally supposed to be released September 9th, 2022. But that film got pushed back to April 21st, 2023. Then it got pushed back in favor of Evil Dead Rise, which took over that spot and put Salem's Lot on the shelf, where it pretty much stayed there, hidden, held hostage by Warner Brothers Discovery, not knowing if they would lock this film up forever, as they were canceling films left and right. Remember Batgirl, everyone? That they were originally going to release until Warner Discovery brought the film, saw the film, and said, we're locking this film in the vault so we don't have to release this film and get our money back for this film. That could have happened with Salem's Lot. Seriously. But thankfully, they just locked it up in a vault and not locked it up and threw away the key like they did with Batgirl and got their money back when they first purchased Warner Brothers. So it was sitting there for from April 2023 to around, I believe, August or late August. Rumblings have happened that they were going to eventually put this film on Max, as there were rumors beforehand that it was going to head straight to Max, and it did finally head straight to Max 2 years after the first release date of September 9th, 2022. It finally got released, for better or worse. So Salem's Lot, the new version of Salem's Lot, is finally out there, and yours truly has to review the film, of course. It was a topic on this podcast. I can't review Terrifier 3 on this podcast because, well, this film pretty much dominated on and off on this podcast with the numerous release date changes. And since this film became a news story on this podcast, how fitting of it that I do a review of this film for the podcast. Now, going into Salem's Lot, I was not literally expecting much, seriously, because personally, the fact that this was bouncing around release dates, and the fact that it got shelved and locked in a vault for 2 years is usually not a good sign. Back in the old days when the film was not really good, studios would lock it in a vault and wait to, say, January or August, the dead months of the calendar, to release the film, so no one would notice amidst all the big summer blockbusters and everything, and maybe make money on this slim chance that it would make money. Once in a great while it would work, but usually it wouldn't work for those types of films, especially releasing in January, because it's pretty much award season, and all the serious films usually would dominate the box office at that time. Nowadays, if it's bad enough, they can just throw it on to streaming. It's simple as that. You don't need to put it in theaters anymore. Just throw it to your streaming service. So that's why I got worried about Salem's Lot here, because of the way that this film was bouncing around release dates to the point where it just got shelved completely. So that was my expectation of this film. I thought it might be a bad film. I was wrong. I thought it was a good film, really. I really thought they did a good job with this film. I could probably see why Warner Brothers Discovery maybe didn't want to throw this one into theaters, because this is a slow-moving film. And nowadays, a lot of slow-moving films are not going to get put into theaters. This is the problem here. If it's slow-moving, then it's not going to get into theaters. But with Salem's Lot, I liked it. I thought it was a good film. It was a different version of it. That's for sure. Compared to the original TV movie, it's very different. A lot of gore in this film. I like how this is a good vampire film. I like my vampire films to have gore in it. I like how writer-director Gary Duberman does a really good job making sure that this film has the feel of a bloody vampire film. I like vampire films that have bite to it. This did not let up on gore at all, as this was really gory. I like the fact that it really does a good job with the way it plays the vampire mythology here, as it's just basic simpleness of how it does its mythology. Duberman also does a very good job with the way he makes sure that he gets a very gothic and dreary look with this film to go along with that 70s vibe in which the film takes place in, because it really looked very good. I like how all the vampires were dark and gothic, very kind of old school. I like also the fact that the way he makes sure he captures that period of the 70s very well, because this could have easily been an updated 2024 version. We've known filmmakers who taken the books, changed the time period to update it to the modern day. I'm happy this film did not go into the modern day. I like the fact that he kept it in the 70s with the drive-in movie theater, the way the police station looked in the film, the way everything looked very aesthetic for its time, especially the way the costumes were too. It also added to that 70s vibe, which was very good, and it really captured what the book did and the original TV movie did as well. Because literally, Salem's Lot is a 70s type of story. If you do Salem's Lot in the modern day, it's not gonna work. I'm sorry. It just will not work at all. Dauberman also does a very good job with the way he directs his cast here, as I like the fact that the cast was good in this film. You really don't have any big names in this film, maybe the exception of Lewis Pullman and Alfre Woodard. That was pretty much the only two names that I recognized from this film. Dauberman makes sure the cast has chemistry with each other, which is good, as the performances are good. I also like the way he directs the action in this film, as it had an intense feel to it. He makes sure that the action is just keeping you glued to the screen, especially that insane finale, which I'm not giving away or any details, but that's definitely something I did not expect to see in this film, but I kind of liked it. It was a much better finale than the TV movie, that's for sure, as the TV movie's ending felt bland and more bleak. This ending really felt much better. Seriously, if I had to compare the endings from the TV movie and the movie, I would definitely go with this ending here on the remake. I still think the original TV movie's the better movie of the two, but in terms of the ending, I like this one much better because it's much more intense. It just is. I just thought the last minutes of the TV movie felt bleak compared to this ending. But then again, it was on TV, so there's a lot of limitations on TV where you can't do certain stuff. So I kind of like that. The writing in this film also I thought was good. I like how they make sure that the vampires in this film are very dark and very creepy looking. I like how the characters also are interesting, which really made the screenplay very good. The screenplay also, I think, does a very good job with the way it keeps the action moving, especially with the scenes towards the end of the film, and with the way it focuses on its main character very well, as everything is done very well to the point that it makes the film very entertaining. It was a good film. I enjoyed it. Do I think it's one of the best films of the year? No. So I've seen better vampire films, i.e. Abigail. But anyway, I really enjoyed this version of Salem's Lot. If I had to choose which version was better, the TV movie or the streaming movie, I'd go with the original TV movie because I thought the directing was top-notch. And the fact that the acting was great, and the fact that it had everything. The only thing that I would say that I would give this movie over the original TV movie was its insane ending, as I really kind of liked that one better than the TV movie. But I can understand the limitations of TV, as they could not have done that insane ending like this film had back in the day, because it would not fly on regular TV back in the late 70s, because you cannot do that ending in the Tobe Hooper version. If Tobe Hooper had Salem's Lot as a feature film in theaters, you'd probably bet he would have done that insane ending in his version if he had that version in theaters, like this version was supposed to be in theaters, but ended up on streaming. Because we all know Tobe Hooper, he's the man behind the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He would have done something wild if he had his version of Salem's Lot on the big screen instead of being relegated to the small screen. So, confident that Tobe Hooper would have had a better ending if he wasn't relegated to the small screen with his version of Salem Slot. But anyway, I have to compare the two endings here. And the remake really has a better ending, quite frankly. But everything else, I really think the original has. Because the original is a great film no matter what. And it is better than the remake, no matter what. But still, definitely check out the remake of Salem Slot, as this was a good remake. It may start off slow at times to set up everything, but once the action gets going, it gets going. In a hurry. 4 stars. Well, next episode I will have my preview of Rhode Island Comic Con, as I'll go into that convention that's happening November 1st through 3rd in Providence, Rhode Island at the Amica Mutual Pavilion in Rhode Island Convention Center. That'll be one of the main topics next episode. I may have an interview next episode as well. I said I would have one this episode, but that didn't materialize. Hopefully next episode that interview will materialize. Fingers crossed. Also keep an eye out on the Film Arcade Media YouTube channel, as I am planning on doing a review to one of the biggest horror films of the year on the YouTube channel. This thing cannot be done on the podcast. This film is so big that I haven't even seen it as I'm recording the end to this podcast. So once I see this film, I will have my review of this film on the Film Arcade Media YouTube channel at youtube.com/FilmArcadeMedia. With that, I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, and other podcast providers. Also subscribe to the Film Arcade Media YouTube channel at youtube.com/FilmArcadeMedia. Don't forget to follow the news on the latest regarding the podcast over on Facebook, Instagram, and the Slasher app at Anthony T's Horror and Wrestling. With that, I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. Support indie wrestling, support indie horror. This has been a Film Arcade Media production.